This is Glambition Radio, episode number 202, with Lesley Jane Seymour, founder of the CoveyClub. Welcome to Glambition Radio. I am your host, Allie Brown. I'm an entrepreneur, mentor, investor, and mom of twins. I love thinking big, doing different, and exploring ideas that disrupt the status quo, especially when it comes to women, because we are rewriting the rules for leadership, business success, making money, and changing the world. And we're doing it with style. Let's go. I want to take you back right now to about, 10, 12 years ago. The kinder, gentler global recession. And in the middle of that, I discovered this magazine called More. And I loved it because it spoke to me just as this intelligent, sophisticated woman, and wasn't all these stupid articles and, still included like beauty and fashion and things like that, but had really interesting perspectives on things and a little bit of a grown-up attitude. And the woman who was the editor-in-chief of More magazine was a woman named Lesley Jane Seymour. And I hadn't heard of her till then, but started to really follow her and what she was doing. Then she'll tell the story today of how More was, very sadly shut down by the powers that be, even though it had a really rabid following in its niche. And man, I still have PTSD because I missed that magazine so much and would still be a loyal subscriber. But I kept following Lesley, and she started to do some really interesting things after also taking some time to really think through. And I just kept thinking, this is a really interesting observation. This woman's had like a hotshot publishing career right out of the gate. Years and years and years of working for all these different magazines, names you would know. That Devil Wears Prada kind of, workplace, just dealt with it all. Then finally she wanted to take some time off and go like, what's this really all about? In my circle, we call that stepping into your iconic work. And I really feel she's doing that now with the CoveyClub. And she'll tell you more about that today. You're going to love this interview with her. Man, and I'm so excited to finally get her on the show. I've been trying to either be at events where she's at or connect with her for years. And it just all lined up so perfectly right now. Quick shout out to 2 reviews that came in. I want to give a big thank you to. The first is Gianetta from the US. Real successful women. With all the fluff pieces out about women in business, Allie's show is about real women making real money and having true business success. I appreciate her guests, her openness, her polished and still casual interview style, and ability to engage very busy entrepreneurs. Highly recommend for advice that's real and women who aren't afraid to own their success. And the second is Fine Memi, I think, from the US. I discovered Allie Brown when she was a guest on Whitney Johnson's Disrupt Yourself podcast. That was an awesome interview, by the way. I have to say, you guys should, if you haven't heard already, go listen to that one because, man, it was just one of those that is going down the books. Found that I couldn't get enough. Decided to play big and began an exit strategy from the job that was crushing my spirit and taking me nowhere. I began to focus on how I could impact others in a meaningful way. I love the practical, real advice that doesn't just make me feel good, but helps me take action. It's inspiring and empowering. Always one of the top podcasts in my rotation. Thank you so much. And she wrote a lot more. If you want to go read it, go check out iTunes. And while you're there, would you leave us a review? It helps more amazing women find this show. Women who need real conversations, real advice, real success stories. Please just help spread the word because there are a lot of smart women listening to some fluffy shows. Now, get ready for a really powerful conversation today with Lesley Jane Seymour, and she's going to tell us a lot about her backstory and how she got where she is. But also, we're going to really go into how never before in history have women had such long careers, exciting choices, and challenges. And that's what led her to creating the CoveyClub. She's going to tell you more about that today. And a quick reminder that our show today is sponsored by The Trust, the new private premier network for 7- and 8-figure women entrepreneurs. If you or another female leader you know is craving more powerful connections, more elevated conversation, and a modern platform for connecting with other high-performing women globally, visit jointhetrust.org for more details and to request a brief informational interview. Now, get ready to be blown away by a powerful conversation with Lesley Jane Seymour of CoveyClub. Lesley, I'd like to know where you are right at this minute.
I am sitting outside on my porch in New Orleans, looking at my bamboo, which needs to be trimmed because it's already hot here and going crazy, and just enjoying the fact that I'm not up north, which is where I've been for the last 40 years.
So I have to tell you that I did a double take because I was looking at where you're located and I'm like, that can't be right. And then I double checked with my team. They're like, no, that's where she lives now. And I'm thinking, okay, that's amazing. She made a change. I'm like, I'm not sure if that's on brand for Lesley Jane Seymour.
Huge on brand.
Yeah. Yes. So tell me all about this move.
So what happened was we'd been in the Northeast for 40 years. I got off the plane after college and went to work at Women's Wear Daily the day after. I'd been stringing for them while in university at Duke, which was completely weird looking back now, how they ever picked me up and let me string for them when I was a senior. I've never, it's completely nuts.
Wow.
Anyway, so I went to work for them. And of course, if you wanted to be in publishing back in the day, that was the only place to be in publishing was New York City. You had to be there.
Yeah.
I'd lived all over the country because my dad was a doctor in the Navy. So I was actually born in Puerto Rico, then went to Florida, then St. Louis, then New Jersey, then New York. I went away to boarding school in Massachusetts and spent a semester abroad in France as well. So I was used to being in other places, but New York was it if you want to be in publishing.
Yeah.
And spent my whole time there because my career in publishing was nice and long and interesting. And finally, when we moved out to the suburbs after about 12 years in the city, and when we had kids and raised our kids in a beautiful suburb called Larchmont.
Yeah.
And then when they finally moved on, my daughter's in dental school at Penn in Philly, and my son is a software designer at an ad agency in Brooklyn. But when you finally realize that they're old enough that they're really just going to come home for like a day or two during a holiday, it's no longer that they're going to come for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or the summer or whatever. I found I could not reinvent myself living in the suburbs. I found it was a place for kids. Everything's about children. Honestly, if I walked down the street naked and didn't have a child in my hand, they would just ignore me. If I had a child, they'd call protective services, obviously. But you literally, if you don't have a child in this suburb, I don't know if it's true at everyone, no one cares. You're dead. You're dead. You're gone.
So you felt complete there.
I felt, yeah, well, I'd done what I had come to do there. And it was an easy commute and I could get back and forth simply and I could have a big career. And it's a beautiful suburb. You're near the water and you can get to the beach in 5 minutes and all that great stuff for kids. And then I just was like, my husband and I were kicking around a big old Georgian house and I wasn't even going to the third floor. And I was like, why are we here? You know, my husband retired from banking finance business 15 years ago. So he said, you know what? We are really not Northeasterners. We never fought about anything. The only thing we would fight about is when it would start to snow and there would be we had a very steep driveway and I would just get really depressed because if I had to get out early, like to go be on Morning Joe or be on something, you'd have to get out at like 5 a.m, right? And the plowman doesn't come until the snow stops. And I mean, it was just this awful stress of cold weather and ice and storms and all that stuff. So we decided it's time to make a move. And we've been looking all over the place and we've been coming to New Orleans for 30 years on and off. Loved it. Loved the people. Loved the laid backness. Loved the food. Loved the music. And we've been looking at houses in different places. And then finally last February, walked into a house here. We always did, house porn shopping wherever we went, knowing that
you pick up the magazines,
Yeah. And we knew we were going to go somewhere else, and we knew we were going to downsize too. And we also wanted to be somewhere where our kids would come. We wanted to have warm weather. We wanted beautiful architecture. We wanted a friendly environment, and also an environment where people are not segregated by age. Because you can go to some places and, even though you're the youngest old person there, you are it's just, there's nobody under the age of 60.
Yep.
So you have a wonderful mix here. And what's really interesting is we came because of what we knew, having been tourists. And what's really extraordinary is what we're learning about the community now that we're locals is even better.
Wow.
And people are so friendly and so giving and so thoughtful, and they connect you with everybody they know, and they want to talk to you and meet you and have a coffee with you and bring you sandwiches. I mean, like, it is the wildest, craziest community. New Yorkers are pretty tough. And if somebody walks up to you, coming at you on the street, and they say hello, you grab your purse and keep walking. You pretend like you don't.
You pretend you're on the phone.
Yeah, you just pretend like you don't speak English. You're like, I don't talk to people on the street. I mean, here, everybody talks to you on the street. And it's funny because a friend of mine, they just love to talk. A friend of mine actually said, you have to add like 20 minutes to all of your events where you're going to meet somebody, because the person before, it's going to talk to you for at least 20 to 30 minutes.
Oh my gosh. This sounds like my husband's dream, because he's Australian. He loves talking. Like, I can't stop him. We'll be like at the restaurant ready to order. And then and I'm starving, and he'll start asking the server about their life story. I'm like, honey, order first. Get the food.
But it's so nice. We have, we moved down here in September, and I think my poor husband thought we were buying a second home. And I was like, why would we buy a second home? We've got a big home we don't need.
So
like,
you did it.
I'm
You're
coming
there.
down here. I'm like coming down here. You can, if you can't adapt. He had never lived in the South. He'd really never lived out of the Northeast. I said, you're welcome to stay in that big empty house up there with nothing to do. But I'm coming down here and I'm going to have fun.
Oh my gosh.
So he got with the program, and we moved down here over the summer, and it's just been amazing. So that's part of my reinvention. I mean, and the real reason too was the house we were in was our kids' house. And I found that they're present. I was like living with ghosts. I found like every corner was, this is where I put her bassinet down. This is where, I remember putting JJ in the tub and putting all those little blocks all over his face and taking a picture. I mean, I could not start my life over, because it was just all about them. And I love them dearly, but I have to move on with my life. And so I had to pick myself up and move to a different location.
Yeah.
And then people told me that if you're like a serious smoker or you have a serious habit you need to get rid of, sometimes you have to move location.
Oh, completely. I've always needed and craved, even daily sometimes, a change of environment. And, I grew up in Connecticut, so I'm very familiar with the areas that you lived in. I lived in New York. Yeah. Lived in New York for years, lived in even LA. And then when I met Brett suddenly and we had the twins, 6-7 years ago now, we just wanted to change. Now we're in Scottsdale, Arizona. Great weather, nice people, total change. So now I need to go back to the moment I first learned your name. And that was the iconic More magazine. And I need to start there. And I'm so sorry, but like this was that magazine. I'm going to try not to cry.
I know.
It was
me too. Don't let me cry.
Okay. The magazine was, I felt like when I first saw it, and I wasn't even, I think, at the age that was your target market. I was in my 30s, and I said, this is finally a magazine that's speaking to women intelligently. Right. It's not focused on like how to tell if he likes your body or stupid stuff.
That's right.
It was so well done. And then when I kept thinking it was hanging in there. I noticed it went through some variations. You got to keep up with things.
Oh yeah.
And then, we won't talk about the end of it yet, but tell me a little bit about your magazine career and what More meant to you. I'd like to at least think that was something very special to you, that magazine.
It was in many ways, because I had my apex moment there. But, I'd been in publishing. I started at Women's Wear Daily. Then I went to Harper's Bazaar. And then I went to the New York Daily News. And then I went to Vogue for 9 years. And then I was freelance while my son was little. And then I went back into Glamour as their beauty editor.
Wow.
Then left to run magazines. And my very first one I ran was YM, which was really crazy. It was old, called Young Miss at one point, but they changed it to YM.
Yeah.
And it was the
I was a
teen market
subscriber when I was little.
was rocking, and it was hilarious and fun and crazy, and you could do anything. And I went from there to Redbook for 3 years. And then I went to Marie Claire USA for 4.5 years, where I discovered that the devil doesn't wear Prada. She wears Dior. And then I went to Moore after that. And the best part about Moore was we never fit in with our publishing company. We had a publishing company that was really designed for middle America. It was about cooking and cleaning. They used to come down the hallways and say, we need someone to go get on the plane to go out to Des Moines for the pork board meeting. And we'd be like, we don't cover pork.
Wait, it was with Meredith? Is it Meredith?
Yeah,
right.
Before
Okay, yeah.
Meredith,
and they do a lot of
Time.
more household stuff.
And before they absorbed Time, they only did cooking and cleaning.
Wow.
So we were the anomaly. We never fit. We had a high household income. We had a smaller circulation, which was 1.5 million. And we knew we were always at risk because we just didn't fit. They didn't have any advertisers for us. I mean, literally, you couldn't put the pork board in our magazine. You couldn't put, they were all mass. And this magazine had a high household income and a high intelligence quota, and everything was wrong. We belonged with like Time or Condé or Hearst, and we were just separated at birth we were in the wrong company. So we always knew it was risky. And when I got there, I kept telling all my friends, it's going to close. For 8 years, it went on like that. And they were like, oh, shut up. Because we were just always on the chopping block because we just never fit in. And right before we closed, though, was the apex of my career, which was we had Mrs. Obama, who was then the sitting first lady. I convinced her to guest edit the issue.
Yeah.
And I spent all this time at the White House with her, and I traveled to Japan and Cambodia with her. And I was actually the White House correspondent for the event in Cambodia.
Wow.
It stretched me. It was just absolutely extraordinary. And she was just everything that you think that's positive about what a first lady could be and more.
Yeah.
She's the real deal. And when that thing came out, it was like the biggest thing that had ever happened to the company. It had 6.5 billion with a B around the world impressions. She was thrilled with it. The West Wing was thrilled with it, which never ever happens. There's always somebody on one side or the other, like, the East Wing's happy, but then the West Wing's upset you did, blah, blah, blah. But everybody loved it. And most important, as she said, she didn't even read the issue the first time it came out. She gave it to her mom. And her mom went upstairs and read it and approved it. And she was fine. But I thought that was so cute for such an accomplished woman that she really wanted to know what her mom thought. And that was kind of it. And she came to speak at the museum, and we had the other first lady, Robin Wright, at the time, who had been doing House of Cards, come. And as was 150 people, all the Meredith brass, and then a lot of publications and people in media and everybody we knew. She was talking about the issue and about doing content with purpose and all that. And we were standing backstage about to go to the podium, and there's Michelle Obama and Robin Wright. And they turn to me and they go, oh, I'm so excited. This is so much fun. And I did this sort of I Dream of Jeannie blink in my head. And I said, click this moment, camera, make it a camera moment like your wedding, right? Because it ain't going to get any better than this. This is it. You're done. What else are you going to do? This is it. So it's all downhill from here. You got these two phenomenons squealing in the back about how excited they are. And you're putting on this show. Okay, over and out. And then really less than a year later it was over and out. But we didn't know it at the time, of course.
I mean, to go from that to then, that's when I thought, okay, they're doing all right. Like when I was witnessing what was happening, this is amazing. Look, they're getting all these readers. This is great.
Oh, yeah. No, readers, we were great with readers. The problem was advertising. And, it was a endemic problem that began hitting the publishing industry, 10 years ago when the internet came on strong, and they were not well equipped to handle it. And they kind of stuck their heads in the sand. And they let Facebook and Google steal all their advertising. And that's what happened. And there are no magazines left. I'm actually glad I got out couple of years ago, because I think now I'm at the point where I'm so detached that when people call me and say, did you hear such and such? I'm like, oh, really? It doesn't pain me.
Good.
It used to
Yeah.
be painful, like, because I grew up on things like Glamour magazine, and I grew up on, I mean, I don't know if you did this, but as a, in college, I would get 10 magazines, and that's what I would spend a full day, going through them and picking out what I was going to buy. And I mean, it was the way we communicated.
It was everything. It was everything to us. It was very important. It was really what you read through most of your 20s were magazines and women's magazines. It shaped, if for better or worse, it shaped a lot of how we thought, how I learned about my body, how I navigated my relationships.
That's right. And we changed people's lives and we saved lives. I remember when I was the beauty editor at Glamour, I was the first person to publish a picture of what a melanoma looks like, because everybody had been talking about it. They would describe it for you. But I remember saying, but I don't know what this looks like. So I put the picture in the piece, and the art director, she was Scandinavian, came running down the hallway and said, I can't publish this ugly thing. It's too ugly. You can't see the ugly thing in my magazine. And I said, look, we have to change what we're doing. I don't know what it looks like. I know the reader doesn't. And when we did publish it, he published an ugly picture. All these people wrote in and said, oh my God, I ripped that out. It looked exactly like what I had on my body. I went to my doctor and got it removed, and that's what it was.
Yeah.
So women's magazines did all of that stuff. We saved lives. We saved marriages. We saved people from domestic violence. We were activists, and that's who I am. I mean, yes, I love a great beauty product. There's nothing like it, and I'm a sucker for every new piece of packaging they put out. But really at heart, what women were doing was activism, changing and exposing and alerting and informing. And I don't really see many of those voices anymore. They were all taken over by advertising.
Yeah.
It's just heartbreaking.
So what you're doing now, were there glimpses of this earlier, or was this like a sudden thing you came up with once you made some, slowed down and thought about what you wanted to do with the rest of your life? Like what happened?
So what happened was I had run 4 major national magazines, and it was freaking fun. I can tell you, I traveled to Europe. I traveled around the world with the First Lady. I walked the red carpet with every celebrity you could imagine. I had a life that, look, I'm just the girl next door. That was never supposed to happen to me, right? I don't have any connections. I don't have anybody big shots that I know. It just working hard and making it happen and sticking your head out there and having some talent, obviously. So when it got to that, and it looked very clear to me that the industry was falling apart, I decided, I had my 5th boss come online in 8 years. And I was like, okay, this is not good. And every time you have a new boss, they want to turn your magazine into a Ginsu knife. It's like, today it's this, tomorrow it's that. And that can't be good for business. So I said, okay, I can't see myself running another magazine. And I don't see management as a good place to be, because they were literally decimating management across town at Time Inc. at that time. They were laying people off, 400 people at a time. And I thought, what else am I going to do? And I had gone to Duke originally to be a marine biologist. And one of my girlfriends who was at L'Oreal had just gotten her degree up at Columbia in sustainability and was working for the cosmetic companies. She came at it from a public affairs point of view, but it sounded so interesting. And I always had that intellectual interest that I pulled her aside and I made her sit down and explain to me what her degree was. And then she hooked me up and said, go up and, meet the guy who runs it and sit in one of the classes. And I did. And I thought, how am I going to do this? I was working full time, but I thought I needed plan B, because obviously publishing's dying. And what I thought I would do is segue over into the beauty business, because I had enough beauty background and knew everybody in the beauty business. And they are in desperate need of help in the area of sustainability. And so I sat down in the class. I was completely fascinated. I applied to Columbia for my master's, and I thought I won't get in. I got in. I signed up for the first semester. I thought I'll never go. I went. I had my first test. I thought I'd flunk. I didn't. And I couldn't tell anybody, because I didn't want anybody on my staff to know, because once they knew that I was planning on something else, they would know. I mean, I would have freaked everybody else out. So And this was 2 nights a week I had to be gone. So I was doing that undercover, trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I loved going back to school as an adult. I mean, I will tell you that if you have the opportunity, it's a completely different experience as an adult. And I finished in 6 years because I did 2 courses the first semester, and I told my husband, don't ever let me do that again. I'll kill myself. It was horrible. And finished in 6 years because I slowed it down to 1 course per semester, got my degree, and I thought that's what I would do. They pulled the plug at more 2 years before that. And my readers came to me and were so angry about the magazine being folded that they asked me to do something else. Now I was tracking over to do sustainability, but I thought, oh, okay, I'd put aside my severance pay. I thought, maybe I should try to be an entrepreneur. I don't know what I'm doing. And I jumped in, and I gave them, I'm a big researcher, so I gave them a survey, and 627 of them took a 54-question survey to the end. And I literally
I think I started it, but I didn't finish it. Sorry.
Yeah, there were like 2,000 people who started it. I mean, who does?
And I'm like, this thing's fucking long. Sorry.
No, it was ridiculous.
I wanted to help you, but
no. But the amazing thing is that's how many people finished it. I mean, can you believe that anybody would even, knowing what we know, I didn't know what I was doing, but knowing what we know today, someone won't even answer 2 questions, right?
It was surveyed out. Those people cared though. We saw that and we're like, oh, this is interesting. We wanted to hear what you were doing.
So anyway, we launched CoveyClub. Then I just literally made a map and I took a little chunk of it. And because today you don't want to build the whole thing, and you can't because you can't afford it. And I thought, let me see what I can do to bring the same feeling as More to the web, because they also had turned more.com into a teenage shopping site. Go figure that one.
I didn't even know that.
Go figure that one. Oh, just whatever. Whatever. So I thought, okay, let me see what I can do. And we launched Covey 2 years ago, and we've been up and rolling. And we're trying to do more in terms of classes and activities. And we have content. We were mostly content focused for a while, but I don't think that's what we can be that as a big differentiator. But I think what we do in terms of events, we had a bunch of live events that have been really great, but obviously sort of postponed right now because of Corona. So we're going to move more to online. We have a lot of webinars that we're doing, which we're going to ramp up. I'm actually ramping up to doing 2 this week and 2 next week coming up, because we usually do like 1 a month or 1 every other week. But where we bring experts, much like our conversation here, and we do it over Zoom, and you can come on and ask questions of the expert. I have book writers, I have doctors, I have, whatever, but it's like a live event, but you can be sitting on the beach in Maui, which we've actually had people do. And obviously with all the disruption going on in our lives right now, we think that that's a good way for us to continue to connect and to learn. The 2 points of difference for Covey is a small group of birds. And the idea was to create a small, cozy place where people could meet and get to know each other, find friends, find business connections, and learn. The distinguishing factor between, this was kind of the More reader, was that I found is that we were lifelong learners. There was something about More that attracted women who like to learn. And they would always say, the first thing to know about me is I'm curious. I'm curious about everything. It just drew, and that's how I am. I'm curious about everything. I'm always learning. I'm always investigating. So that's kind of who we drew, and kind of brought them into CoveyClub.com with me. And then I have a podcast, which is called Reinvent Yourself. And we're almost at 100 podcasts now. We've done everybody from Gretchen Carlson to lots of people you don't know, and investigating how people reinvent themselves. And it could be not just career. It might be health issues. It might be escaping a bad marriage. The big broad definition of reinvention. Because
this is a huge theme for almost everyone right now. I don't know anyone who hasn't been reinvented, but the majority of women that I work with personally are in their probably 40s.
Yep.
And it's often the time their businesses start to take off because they really decide, what do I have to lose?
That's right.
They're so excited. And it's a huge, I think we should be thankful for the opportunity we have for all this reinvention because, the previous generations didn't have that opportunity, but that brings challenges. So, so in your career and all of the women that you've worked with and observed, what do you think is the state of the union now for women who are, 40s, 50s, 60s? Is it exciting? Is it challenging?
I think it's both. I think you have the opportunity to reinvent yourself. And as we used to laugh at more because we dealt with reinvention on every page of the magazine. We used to say, or you may be given the opportunity to reinvent yourself, which we were all given. It's a very topsy-turvy changing world, as we know. And there's no direct line. I look back at my husband's father. He worked at one place and he left there, in his 70s. Mm-hmm. And he got the gold watch. He got that. I mean, that doesn't happen anymore. It just doesn't happen. You're going to have, all kinds of disruptions. Also, because we're working longer. B, because the rate of turnover of invention, of things that are happening out there and things that just like the internet that disrupt old businesses are sped up. And so you have to be resilient to change. And no one has a straight line from 20 to 40 anymore. And it could be something that happens with a kid. It could be something that happens, you could be divorced or widowed. You could have something that happens when you're going to be an early empty nester or a late empty nester. You're going to move. Your business is absorbed by someone else. I mean, I hear this all the time. One of the speaking things that I do is I go around and talk about why you need to have a reinvention plan in your back pocket. And a lot of people say, oh, I've been in this bank for 22 years and they love me here and it's great. And we're a small community bank and, everybody knows everybody. And then I hear 3 months later, they were bought by an international conglomerate and they were merged and everybody's out of a job. It's nothing to do with you. They can love you. It has nothing to do with that. It's what's going on in the world is very different. So you have to prepare and you have to have a reinvention mindset. And after interviewing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reinventors, big and small, what I think is the key to the whole thing is, and then this is what I say to women, is remember the nice guy who was always around you when you were younger, but he would bring you flowers, or he was the one you'd cry on, shoulder you'd cry on, but you never considered him for a mate, right? Those are the reinvention opportunities that are all around you. You just can't see them because you're not in the right mindset. And so what they say is you've got to keep your eyes open to all the reinvention possibilities that throw themselves in front of you. And they do. It's like those things where you say to your girlfriend, why didn't someone figure out a better cap for a, toothpaste, blah, 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 blah. And everybody's like, oh, someone would have thought about that if they could have. When you're in the reinvention state of mind, you say, well, let me explore that. Mm-hmm. And you have to. And, look, some people are going to be happy being an entrepreneur. Some people are going to want to go back to school, which I highly advise for anybody who's thinking about it because it's totally rejuvenating and can put you on a different path. I haven't personally figured out what I'm going to do with my sustainability degree yet, but it informs everything I do and think about. And I'm sure down the road it will come to something specific. But I'll tell you the thing about Columbia, which was unexpected. I actually learned more about technology at Columbia than I did in my publishing career. The publishers were so far behind technologically that I learned more being in school with those 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds in my classroom, having to adapt and learn, it's like when I first signed up, and I was like, oh, I'm going to the registrar. Where do I get in line? And it's like, no, there's no line. It's all done online, you idiot. So you really learn by hanging out with these millennials and they teach you, so.
Yeah. This is wonderful. So we'll come support you at CoveyClub. We're going to listen to the show.
Yes. Reinvent Yourself is the
Reinvent Yourself. Fantastic.
Yep.
Okay. And then, in all your breadth and depth of experience, it's probably hard to narrow down some of the advice you have, but for the women listening today, you have women, a lot of us, I'd say 30s, 40s, 50s, often in a place of either opportunity or challenges with everything going on right now. What would be some of your best tips for these women right now?
Well, I think it goes back to the reason why I got into magazines. The reason why I got into them was because when you're young, you feel so isolated when bad things happen to you. My parents divorced when I was like 10 years old. And at that point, I was the only kid on the block with divorced parents. And I was actually told I couldn't play with certain kids. They thought it was contagious. And what I realized is that if you started reading things like magazines, you'd find out, oh, there are other people who go through divorced parents too, and they survive. We need each other. And that is the key to everything I do, is how do you bring us together, even if you don't have to do something together, to know that you are not alone, to listen to other people's stories, to read, to talk, to connect, and find those places where you can create community. And I think, we all thought Facebook was going to be a place to do it, and it's a very toxic environment. You don't want to be there. Those social media.
I remember
things.
the dream.
Yeah, the
I
dream.
remember we thought it'd bring us all together. And
no, unfortunately. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with Covey. We have a little app called Covey Connect, which is private. Nobody scrapes your info, where we can talk and actually share our worries and our concerns. And a lot of people are talking very frankly and right now about, how freaked out they are by all this COVID stuff that's going on and how we're all being locked down and we don't know what the future holds. Find your community. Find those women like you. Find the places that you can reach out and find support. We cannot do this alone, as we see. We are all interconnected and we all have to protect each other and take care of each other. And in a bizarre way, we may find that that's what we learn out of this terrible virus experience, is that we're all going to have to lean on each other more and care for each other. So you need to find those things. And when you think that you're the only one who's feeling lonely, or you're the only one who's feeling that they can't concentrate, or you're the only one who's feeling like you're afraid that you're experiencing age discrimination on your job, you are not. You just haven't found the right people to talk to, because and sometimes all you need is talk. Sometimes just knowing there's a group there who understands what you're talking about and knows it's real and can support you, that's enough to get you through it. So number one is find your group. And number two is realize no one gets through this unscathed. It's too long a lifetime. It's kind of like Margaret Mead, where she said that, she expected that everybody's going to get divorced at some time because we're living longer. I mean, in the old days, Romeo and Juliet had to marry early because you croaked when you were 35, right? Mm-hmm. So we are going to have disruption. It's not your fault. It's going to happen. And, as I say, it's when bad change comes to good people, it happens. So you cannot blame yourself. We all make choices. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. But you need, again, to find the sources and the communities that will support you in how you move through those kinds of things. Life is about change. It's not about stasis. And it's about things are going to change, and how you adapt to them are the most important things. And be a lifelong learner. I will tell you, learning, reading, absorbing, taking courses really can rejuvenate you, change your point of view, make you feel like a kid again, trying things, forcing yourself into things that make you put a flutter in your stomach, pushing yourself. I mean, that was one of the things that we did with coming to New Orleans is, it was scary. We just uprooted ourselves. And people say to us, they're like, oh, so you're coming down here in the winter. We're like, no, we just packed up and came here. And they're like, you did? They even think we're crazy. And it was scary. And I thought, this could be a total bust. We went and bought a house, and maybe it won't work out. Maybe the people won't be nice. And maybe. And I was scared, but I like that's where I grow. When I'm slightly scared and when I'm unsure and when I'm nervous, that's where I grow, because it forces me to reach out to new people. It forces me to connect in a different way. It forces me to learn new things, to understand people in a different way. When we get too comfortable and we don't have that sense, that's when I think that you can feel like, you can feel grumpy about your life. You can only look at the things that aren't going right. Sometimes you just have to really pull the rug out from under your feet and say, put me in a new situation. And it makes you feel young. That's all I can tell you. I'm 63 and I feel like I'm 20 again. And it's because I pushed myself out there to try something new. I don't look at myself as, any particular age, because I am always learning. And I learn from young people, learn from old people, but push yourself and don't just sit there and get complacent. And if you're bored and if you're unhappy, push yourself out into something new. Sometimes it's just forcing yourself into a new environment. And if you really feel like you are stuck, there are many ways to get help for that. We have a thing that for people who are super stuck, for who really, really are ready to make movement, called Camp Reinvention, which is on our website, where I'm working with 2 coaches and we're digging deep. And I'm actually doing that with them now. I'm a student and a participant at the same time.
I love it.
Well, because being an entrepreneur makes you can no longer blame the guy above you for all the things that you're not doing right with your business when it's your own, right? Yeah. And it makes you being an entrepreneur makes you face your issues that you may have not had to face when all you did was one little segment of a business and you did it really well. I have issues with money. I have issues asking people for money. I didn't know how bad they were, but I'm working on them now with these 2 coaches in Camp Reinvention. And we have a whole weekend that we went away and we worked really deeply on it. And then 6 months of coaching calls afterwards and a group to work on it with. And I'm seeing movement. These are things that were blocking me from doing a really good job at what I'm doing. But I never had to address those. I always had a publisher who did all that stuff. So I didn't have to deal with my issues.
Oh yeah. When you run a business, it's the best personal development tool you could invent. Like this brings up anything that's been lingering there comes up. And I just love how you're sharing this. I think it's fantastic. And that shows how you are a lifelong learner and you're just committed to being a better and better person and human being. So thank you for what you're doing.
And thank you. I mean, I think I love anybody who is out there and helping women to improve themselves and make them not feel so alone, because it's the aloneness. We don't like to talk about it. We all feel like losers if we admit that we're lonely or we don't like this solitariness. But the fact is, we live very solitary lives. And right now, as we go into this lockdown and all this crazy stuff, it's going to get even more solitary feeling.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not like that. That's not how humans are meant to be. We're meant to connect. We're meant to kiss and touch and hug and be together. And, we know for a fact that it affects your health, that it affects your mental health, that it affects everything. It impacts everything physically. So let's be honest about it. And I think if people who've been very successful at other things can be honest about it, I think it helps other people feel like it's okay to be honest about it too.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have a little girl crush. I'm still kind of getting over it. I've just seen you for years on the pages of the magazines.
Well, this was
fantastic.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and we'd love to have you back at some point to talk about more about your reinvention. We appreciate it.
Happy to do it.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Glambition Radio. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe so you automatically get new shows every week. And I'd love if you left us a review. We are on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and other platforms. And I'd love to hear from you. Come join the conversation online. You'll mostly find me on Instagram, but also on Facebook, Twitter, and more. Just head to alliebrown.com. You will find them all there. And you can also learn about upcoming opportunities to meet in person. Glambition Radio is the elevated conversation for women leaders, and I'm honored you've tuned in.